Instant runoff voting. May the best candidate win. Over the next few minutes, we will investigate how instant runoff voting often overlooks the best candidate as described by the voters, but is deemed a successful election because no voting machines exploded or burst into flames, there were no paper cuts, and, in the end, someone was elected, usually by less than a majority, and it doesn't even have to be instant. In fact, in Minneapolis, they warned that it may take up to 8 weeks to decide on who the winner was. So how does one determine whether an election was a success? Political scientists typically look at whether it reflected the will of the people. In a traditional election, one person, one vote, that's pretty easy to do. You just count the votes up, 1, 2, 3. The person with the most votes wins. They have the most support of the people. But in an instant runoff voting election, that's a little more difficult with the vote shuffling and recounting. It doesn't always match with the voters' intent. So political scientists and universities now have begun to study instant runoff voting and ranked choice voting. And that's just what the folks over at University of Vermont's Legislative Research Shop has done. They've taken a look at the recent Burlington, Vermont's election for mayor and analyzed it against typical election criteria. What they found was surprising. They've published several papers on the election describing the problems, and most recently published an assessment on instant runoff voting. Links will be provided at the end. Why the renewed interest in Burlington? Well, because now there's a petition drive to get rid of instant runoff voting. Another case of buyer's remorse after experiencing instant runoff voting a couple of times. Now let's take a look at one of the problems experienced in the election. One of the ways to determine if a ranking method is democratic is if the winner reflects the will of the people and selects the candidate with the most support. You can determine this with the head-to-head competitions based upon their ranking. Here we have a spreadsheet of the recent Burlington, Vermont mayor's election. We have eliminated the minor candidates and their votes did not affect the outcome. You can see in each case, some voters just voted for their favorite candidate and no one else. Can you tell who wins just by looking at it? Okay, let's run the instant runoff counting scheme. People are eliminated, votes are moved around, recounted, some votes thrown away. Okay, enough of the suspense. Kiss was elected with 48% support. Putting it another way, 52% of the voters rejected him that day. Ranked choice voting typically acts like a plurality based upon the turnout when selecting its winners. Let's start looking at the head-to-head information contained within these votes. Here we have Kiss battling Wright. The rankings show us 4,314 voters want Kiss to win over Wright, and 4,064 prefer Wright to Kiss. So 51.5% of the voters wanted Kiss to win over 48.5% to Wright. Okay, let's look at the matchup between Montrell and Wright. 4,597 wanted Montrell to win versus Wright, and 3,668 wanted Wright to win over Montrell. That's 55.6% of the voters wanting Montrell to win versus Wright. That's a huge majority. Now onward to a matchup between Kiss and Montrell. Remember, Kiss won using instant runoff voting, and he was preferred to win over Wright, and Montrell was preferred in a head-to-head over Wright. Let's see what the voters have to say with this matchup. 4,067 voters preferred Montrell to win over Kiss. But let's see how the support is for Kiss in this matchup. We have only 3,477 voters favor Kiss to win over Montrell. Montrell is favored by over 8% to win in a head-to-head matchup with Kiss. That's quite a margin. So what does this all mean? Because of recent sunshine laws, researchers are able to access the ballot results, analyze them, and see if voters' choice align with the instant runoff voting results. We found that Kiss would have won against Wright in a head-to-head battle, and Montrell would have won against Wright in a head-to-head race. And Montrell would have won against Kiss by a large margin. Montrell, without question, would have beat all the candidates in a head-to-head race and had the majority of support of all the voters. So let's take a look at how the instant runoff voting scheme of vote shuffling and recounting treated the candidate who would have beat them all in a head-to-head battle. As you already knew, Kiss came in first place with the instant runoff voting. But what about the other results? Wright came in second place, and Montrell came in dead last. Surprising, isn't it? The candidate that was shown to beat all others in a head-to-head battle came in last place. Had this been a traditional election, political scientists agree voters would have voted differently than in a ranked choice voting or instant runoff election as seen here. Many voters who voted for Wright first, a Republican, and Montrell second, would have voted for Montrell, knowing that a Republican hasn't won for mayor in decades. In this case, it shows that the spoiler effect can happen with instant runoff voting. It's important to note that although there have been many IRV elections in the U.S., most have been with private groups not bound by sunshine laws. Just a handful of municipal elections have been bound by these important transparency laws. These laws should include access to ballot images or strings, the 1, 2, 3 votes of each ballot. That's the information on who the people voted for and if they voted for 1, 2, or 3 candidates. It does not include any personal information, and a paper audit trail of each ballot, and a full description of the algorithm and calculations used to count the votes. An electronic image of paper ballots versus the scans, the output, just like in any election. In fact, there is a lawsuit recently filed in Aspen, Colorado, where the city is blocking this type of information. Very troubling. What does this all mean? Without access to all the votes, universities, political science departments, and election integrity experts cannot study the full effects of instant runoff voting and see if it truly is a democratic voting method. Here is an example of a ballot string of about 13 voters' votes. Complex looking, isn't it? But it contains all the information needed to study an election. When results like this happen, it undercuts the legitimacy of the electoral process and is just undemocratic, and has just come to light since we now can study the results of the instant runoff voting elections. It has been said that most voting systems has some flaws, but as shown here, instant runoff voting has more than its fair share. With its complex vote shuffling algorithm, it doesn't always select the most preferred candidate as selected by the voters, and in this real-life example, it put him last. This isn't a hypothetical example, this is real life. Volunteers walked door to door to support this candidate. People came out to vote, and to have this perverse outcome, you can see why the people of Burlington are signing the petition to stop using instant runoff voting. This new voting method was supposed to improve the election, not make it more undemocratic.